The Fall Route, Station 2. Run with the Alpine spirits in Blutkogel, but beware their rods. They cut deep and leave marks that never fade. Our escape from Vallombra had left me doubting reality. We holed up in a cheap hotel in a small Italian town. Riley and I indulged in a few days of pizza, aimless walks, and strong espresso. But Riley kept pushing me to cut the footage from Vallombra, the first stop on this so-called fall route that consists of 6 places across Europe, each with its own dubious challenge. Even after Vallombra, I still wasn't sure if the whole thing wasn't just a creepypasta. Riley didn't agree. She pushed me every day to continue our trip. Come on, Leo. We have to go to the second spot and film our trip. Equinox Eternal is gonna want his 10 grand back if we just hang out here, she said, pacing the room. I shrugged. So what? I'd rather go home in one piece if there's even a chance that what Equinox Eternal wrote about the fall route is real. She rolled her eyes. Don't be a buzzkill. The Vallombra video is almost ready, and it's going to be better than anything we have published so far. Even with the shaky footage, she said it through a mouthful of croissant, the same kind she got every morning. We came to debunk the fall route. That was the plan. But after Vallombra, I wasn't sure it was going to be that simple. Eventually, I gave in. It's hard to say no to Riles. Since Vallombra, she'd been different, bolder, restless. There was something almost feverish in her energy. I told myself it was the chestnut wine she drank there. I hadn't touched it. Weird thought, I know. That's why I didn't mention it to her, which, in hindsight, might have been a mistake. The next stop on the fall route was a mountain village called Blutkogel in Austria. I'd scraped together what little info existed online. Not much, just that it sat at the bottom of a valley and it had exactly 86 inhabitants. No gas station, no ATM, no cell reception. What it did have was a tradition called Perchtenlauf. Once a year, the villagers dressed up in costumes, grabbed birch rods, and ran through the streets hitting people, supposedly to drive away malevolent alpine spirits. Sounded harmless enough. Getting there, though, was a nightmare. Endless serpentines up the mountains. Riley drove while I tried not to vomit into a paper bag. We didn't talk, just sat there tight-faced, silently praying for the road to end. The road wound between large mountain peaks, covered by forests that glowed in the scarlet and gold colors of fall. When we passed the town sign, it was already late afternoon. At the village entrance, we found a wide gravel lot, probably meant for hikers in the summer. It was packed with cars, but Riley managed to squeeze the Jeep into a spot without tearing off one of the mirrors. I stepped out and immediately shivered. It was chilly here for end of October, like the valley had skipped fall and gone straight to winter. Riley tossed me a hoodie and pulled hers on. I slung our bags over one shoulder, grabbed the camera gear, and we started walking. That's when I took a closer look at the other cars. Most of them were coated in dust and fallen leaves, like they hadn't moved in months. A few tires were flat. One rusted 4-seater had weeds growing through the wheel wells. Weird. Maybe this wasn't the guest parking lot after all, but a place where the villagers left their discarded vehicles to rust. The dirt road curved up a gentle slope toward the village. Just a dozen of wooden houses. They looked as if the families living here had built them with their own hands. Well-crafted and cozy. Smoke curled from chimneys, even though it seemed that most of the villagers were outside, prepping for the festival. In front of a small wooden church, people gathered, setting up drink stands and food stalls. The smell of mulled cider was in the air, mixed with the scent of damp leaves, sweet and earthy. A few heads turned when we reached the square, but nobody approached us. So, we continued down the road of houses until we spotted the sign, Helga's Rooms. I'd booked us a whole cottage. The woman I'd messaged told me the key would be under the flower pot. Inside, I started unpacking our gear, spreading everything across a rustic table covered in a crocheted cloth that would have made my grandma proud. Riley was already off, bouncing from room to room. "Oh my God, Leo," she shouted. "This place is insane. It's like a farmhouse from the 1800s. All the chairs, tables, and even the bed looked handmade, with little hearts carved into them. We even had our own wood-burning stove. Riley whipped out her phone and started filming a tour for our followers. "Isn't this gorgeous?" she said, spinning a circle. "I feel like we're inside a gingerbread house in a fairy tale from the Grimm brothers." "I just hope our stay here doesn't come with a German fairy tale ending," I said. After we had settled in, I pushed to head out and find food. I was starving, and the smell drifting through the open window, melted cheese, roasted onions, wasn't helping. "All right, big guy, I'll look for someone I can interview about this Perchtenlauf thing, or how it is called for the channel. Meet you in front of the church." She was out the door before I could say anything. The idea of her wandering around alone didn't sit right, not after Valombra. So I hurried up to keep an eye on her, while I'd get some food for us. Since she often forgets to eat when she is excited, I'd get something for her as well. I pulled my hoodie tighter and headed toward the square in front of the church. I was taken aback by the amount of guests that had gathered there while we were unpacking. Now it was packed with locals in traditional Austrian attire and some tourists. The line for the food stand stretched past 3 houses. I got in line and scanned the crowd for Riley. She was easy to spot in her red hoodie, especially since most of the people around were wearing muted greens. Then I saw them, a group that didn't blend in. No jackets, no jeans. They wore ragged costumes made of black sheep fur, stitched together like something out of a nightmare. Their masks wore hand-carved, grotesque, twisted faces with exaggerated features, red tongues hanging out like they were frozen mid-scream. Around their necks hung massive cowbells that clanged with every step. Each of them carried a birch rod. I didn't notice it was my turn until the girl at the food stand said something. I blinked, shook myself out of it. She wore a traditional dress with a golden apron, her long brown braids swinging as she leaned towards me. I managed to order 2 raclette sandwiches, which was basically a fancy type of grilled cheese, and went over to Riley to bring her one. She was so caught up in the conversation, she didn't even see me coming. I tickled her and she squealed, lowering her phone she was using to film. The old man she was talking to wore these traditional leather pants that I'd already seen on a bunch of people. He also had a hat with feathers on. His skin seemed rough, probably from decades spent outside in the cold wind. But he had a genuinely friendly smile, even though he was missing a few teeth. "Franz here says it's gonna get pretty wild later," Riley said, grinning. "The guys in the furry demon costumes are gonna chase people and smack anyone they catch with their birch rods." Franz nodded solemnly. "Not for pretty girls," he said, his accent thick. "Better take her inside." Riley shook her head, eyes bright. "No way, I'm staying out. I want to see everything." I didn't argue. What would have been the point? Of course she wasn't going to sit this one out. Not while I was out here filming, trying to prove to our followers, especially Equinox Eternal, who had paid us to go on this trip, that the fall route was just imagination. Franz walked away slowly, but halfway through the crowd, he turned back. "Do not mistake the Perchtenlauf for tradition," he said, voice low and rough. "It's a pact, has to be renewed every year. Keeps away bigger harm. Your curiosity will cost you if you stay outside." I watched him go. His words left behind a weird feeling, even though the mood on the square was upbeat. A choir had gathered and sang energetic and folk songs, and people were talking and laughing so loudly it was hard to have a conversation. But the cowbells cut through everything, shrill and metallic. They rang out from the masked figures as they moved through the crowd. While the darkness of the night was slowly creeping in on the village, lanterns lit up and the crowd thinned out. People moved to the edges of the road, leaving space for the costumed group to pass through. There were way more of the masked figures now, easily over 100. Each costume looked handmade and unique, especially the wooden masks. While I was walking around, trying to find the best spot to film the spectacle that was gonna start soon, something caught my eye. Every door frame had symbols carved into the wood, sharp geometric shapes I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was just part of the local aesthetic, but they didn't look like they were built into the frame. More like someone added them later. Scratched in, shallow, and not really decorative either. Before I could figure out what the symbols meant, the drums kicked in and the whole thing started. A line of guys with marching drums came down the streets, leading the pack of masked figures. Perchten, they're called. Alpine demons, apparently. The sound was heavy, rhythmic, and loud enough to shake the window. Anyone still lingering in the middle of the road got the message and moved aside fast. Torches flared up around us. Locals were lighting the path like they'd done this 100 times. I realized there weren't any kids outside anymore. Most of the women had disappeared too. I waved Riley over to where I'd set up the camera. She was still filming, of course. "Stay close to me, Riles," I said, low enough that only she could hear. The bells went off hard when the demons started moving, loud enough to drown out everything else. The guys in costume didn't stick to the cleared path. Instead, they broke formation and started swinging at the crowd with birch rods. Not gently either. People scattered, laughing, ducking, shoving each other to stay out of reach. It looked chaotic, but no one seemed scared. Just part of the show, I guess. I kept filming until Riley grabbed my arm. "Come on, Leo," she said. "This guy offered to let me try on one of the masks. You have to film this." She was already pulling me through the crowd. I barely had time to grab my tripod before she dragged me to the porch of one of the wooden houses. A young man who had barely even grown a beard yet, in traditional leather pants and plaid shirt, sat on the steps. He held one of those wooden masks on his lap. Only now, I realized how big those things were. It covered all of his thighs and would probably cover most of Riley's upper body if she tried to put it on. It would be way too heavy for her. The guy spotted us, winked at Riley and stood up. Hadn't said a word yet, but I already didn't like him. "Still want to try on my mask?" he asked. "It's never been worn. I carved it ahead of time for next year. That'll be my first parade." He looked down at the thing like it was sacred. The mask was massive, brutal looking, and he had this weird pride in his eyes that made me feel like I just didn't get it. Whatever this tradition was, I was definitely on the outside. "Yes," Riley said, already hopping up the last few steps to sit next to him. I cracked my knuckles, let out a breath, and set up the camera. There was something about those masks, the detail, the time it must have taken to carve each one. It wasn't just for show. These people put meaning into them. I just didn't know what kind yet. Riley was laughing when he lifted the mask and held it up to her face. It was huge. She practically disappeared behind it. Then he tied the leather straps around her head. I blinked once, twice. The mask stayed up, no hands holding it, just locked in place like it belonged there. Riley's laugh cut off into a scream. I lunged toward her, nearly knocked over the camera. She was clawing at the mask, yelling, "Take it off me! Take it off!" I grabbed it, tried to pull it off, but it wouldn't move. It felt fused to her skin. That thought alone made my stomach turn. I pulled out the pocket knife I always carry and sliced through the straps. The mask finally came loose and dropped to the ground with a thud. Riley looked up at me, eyes wet, shaking like she's just come out of a nightmare. I pulled her into a hug and held her tight. She kept muttering into my ear, voice barely there. I saw fire, everything burning, faces melting off. The mountains are closing in on us. We need to run. Sure thing, Riles. We can leave right away if you like, I said. I was worried, yeah, but also kind of relieved. She wasn't brushing it off this time. Whatever she saw through that mask had flipped a switch. Her survival instinct was finally back. I let go of her and turned to find the guy who gave her the mask. But he was gone. So was the mask. I packed up the camera, grabbed Riley's hand, and we started heading toward the cottage. Or tried to. The masked villagers had spread out, driving off the rest of the crowd. In the torchlight, their carved faces looked more animated than before. Some of the masks had long red tongues hanging out, swaying with every step. It felt like they were mocking us. I stepped forward, hoping they'd let us pass. They didn't. Instead of making space, they started running towards us. The cowbells were deafening now, like they were inside my skull. No way. This stuff is real. The fall route is real, Riley whispered, still filming with her phone. Of course she was. I grabbed her and ran. Instinct. You don't think when a mob of demon-masked villagers is charging at you with sticks. We cut right, past the church. I had no clue where we were headed. Didn't matter. We had to get out, even if it meant leaving our stuff behind. Another right, down a narrow path between wooden houses. I hoped it led to the parking lot. I could hear footsteps and bells behind us. I slowed down so I wouldn't drag Riley. The torches and lanterns faded behind us. We were swallowed by darkness. I prayed we wouldn't trip. I pulled out the jeep key and hit unlock. Headlights flared about 20 steps ahead. We could make it. I shoved Riley into the passenger seat, jumped in and turned the key. My hands were shaking. The engine coughed, then died. I tried again. Nothing. The cowbells were getting louder. In the headlights I saw them. Dark shapes circling the car. We had no way out. What are they gonna do to us? Riley's voice cracked. She was close to tears. They're not gonna get us, I said. Tried to sound sure. Didn't feel it. I locked the doors, hoping that would mean something, but I couldn't shake the thought. Were they really gonna smash the windows? For a tradition? Glass shattered. Damn it, I muttered, pulling Riley close, shielding her with my body. My heart was hammering. A sudden high-pitched sound cut through the air. A voice, shifting between sharp and low tones. Yodeling. I'd heard this style of singing before in a video about the Alps. It sounded like a harrowing call. The masked figures froze. Then, without a word, they turned and ran, back toward the village, Blutkogel. I watched them, breathing heavily. It took a moment until my heart had calmed down enough, so that I managed to shake off the paralysis. Come on, Riles, I said, voice low. We need to find somewhere to hide. We're not getting out of here tonight. Okay, she said, steadying herself. She took the camera from my hands and turned it on. We gotta document what's happening here, Leo. It seems like Equinox Eternal was right. Something weird's going on in these places. I didn't care about content right now. Not even a little. But I let her film. If pointing a lens at the chaos helped her stay grounded, I wasn't gonna stop her. All right, I said, but keep it quiet. We slipped out of the jeep and crept back into the village. The torches were still burning along the roads, but the place was dead quiet. We reached the square near the church, and that's when I heard the cowbells again. There were at least 30 of them, masked figures dragging 4 women up the road toward one of the mountain trails. The women were fighting back, shouting, pleading, trying to break free, but the group kept pushing them forward. I couldn't just stand there. I didn't know what they were planning, but it wasn't harmless. It felt wrong. Go to the cottage, hide, I whispered to Riles. She huffed and didn't move. I had to do something. If I could distract them, I might give those women a shot at getting away, even if it meant putting myself in their path. I stepped into the square and yelled, "What do you think you're doing? Let them go!" The cowbells drowned me out. Most of the masked people didn't even flinch, but a few turned and they started sprinting straight at us. Damn it. I'd hoped to pull more of them off the women, not get us chased again for nothing. We bolted down the street toward the cottage. I didn't look back, just ran. Then a door swung open ahead of us, spilling warm light onto the road. "Come in, quickly," an old woman called out, waving us in. I didn't think, just grabbed Riley and pulled her through the doorway. The room was dim, lit only by candles. They flickered hard when I slammed the door behind us. I leaned against it, breathing fast, listening for the bells until they faded into the distance. The old woman pointed us toward the big wood-burning stove. She disappeared into the kitchen and came back with mugs of herbal tea that smelled like pine and something bitter. "You were stupid to stay outside tonight. Curious tourists," she said, scoffing. Her voice sounded familiar. but I couldn't place it. Maybe from earlier in the day? You were lucky I managed to call them back at the last second, she went on, watching the steam curl from her cup. They would have dragged you up the mountain, given you to the spirits to calm what lies hidden beneath. I didn't say anything, just sat there, trying to process what the hell that meant. Riley sipped her tea like she hadn't just been chased by a mob. I kept my eyes on the door. Is that what happened to the woman they were dragging away? I asked. Cold crept through my body, imagining that it could have been Riley and me. It isn't avoidable, she said, slow and steady. The mountain needs to stay calm, or something older and worse than what you've seen will wake up. I stared at her, and it clicked. The yodeling, that voice cutting through the chaos. It had been her. She'd pulled them back and saved us. I couldn't stop wondering if they'd caught us. Would those women have gotten away? Or would we all be up that mountain right now? Thank you, I said, standing. We should head back to our cottage. You've already done more than enough. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Stay, she said. There are no marks on the tourist houses. They'll find you if you sleep there. I swallowed and sat back down. Riley leaned forward, phone in hand. Could you tell us more about what's hiding under the mountain? The old woman shook her head, clearly annoyed. It's none of your business, child. You must leave as soon as the sun rises. We tried, I said, but our car wouldn't start. I'm starting to think someone messed with it. The old woman shrugged. Don't bother yourself. You can take one of the cars that were left behind. I have some keys here. They won't ever come back for them anyway. I stared at her. Was she talking about people like those women? Visitors who didn't make it out? I didn't ask. Didn't want the answer. I made a mental note. Riley and I were going to have a serious talk tomorrow. This whole thing was going too far. I was not going to risk our lives again just for social media. Before we crashed on the blankets the old woman had laid out near the stove, she insisted on checking us for injuries. Riley rolled up her sleeve, and that's when I saw it. A black cut running across her forearm. I felt something sharp when we were running to the parking lot, she said. But I was so pumped with adrenaline, I didn't really notice. Must have been one of their rods. She didn't sound worried enough. That worried me. The old woman didn't say much. Just cleaned the wound with iodine. Riley curled up and was out in minutes. Only then did the exhaustion hit me. Everything slowed down. But before I could lie down, the woman pulled me into the kitchen. She leaned in close, voice low. Your friend carries the mark now. Keep her close, or lose her before winter ends. Thank you for watching an episode of our Fall Route series. I'm your narrator, Afik, and this episode was written by my lovely partner, Effi, and together we are stories of solstice. If you enjoy this, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and see you in the next episode.